With experience, the Egyptians built ever more beautiful and more captivating pyramids up to the reign of Khufu. We are now in 2560 BC. First, it is necessary to select the construction site. They examine the Giza Plateau. Then, they measure the quantity of clay limestone. Depending on the volume of the limestone, they determine the size of the pyramid. Here in Giza, there is white and dark clay limestone. The plan is to make a pyramid with dark limestone for the interior and white limestone for the exterior. Above the present hill, there was soft clay limestone about 11 meters thick, which made a hill 30 meters high at the time. Here is how high the soft limestone wall was at the time. 11 meters of clay limestone represents approximately 7 to 8 million cubic meters, which is more than enough to build 3 pyramids with mastabas all around. The volume of the Great Pyramid is only 2.6 million cubic meters. That's what this represented seen from the side. It is almost imperceptible seen from far away. At the location of the tunnels and the underground chamber, there was a cavity about 30 meters. The place is chosen. It will be the Giza Plateau. Before starting the pyramid, the Egyptians established a model. Here are examples of models. A miniature limestone model of the apartments of the Hawara Pyramid. The construction of this monument absolutely required a careful preliminary plan. The architecture of the pyramid was determined based on a very precise and detailed plan. Everything that was thought of from the start was carried out and scrupulously respected. To build a pyramid, you must choose the shape of the triangle. The question is, what triangle? This is a triangle. This one too. There is a choice from 230,000 triangles and 110 million possibilities to make a pyramid. But the Egyptians chose only one, the only one, the perfect one. According to their sacred principles, they laid a base that measures 440 cubits. Then they divided the base by pi, or 140 cubits. That, multiplied by 2, equals 280 cubits. The result is the height of the pyramid. And the apothem divided by half the base equals 1.618. The Egyptians absolutely wanted to integrate the constants pi and the golden ratio. The pyramid became sacred since it was built with the cubit 52.36, the royal constant, and the meter. 4 universal constants were linked together in this building. There was no such thing as chance. 50 centimeters more or less, and pi disappeared from the pyramid. The Egyptologists would have been relieved. Phew, there is no pi. But no, the Egyptians did not make any mistakes. They built a pyramid 280 cubits high and 440 cubits wide. The pyramid is exceptionally precise, to within 1 centimeter, which shows the pi value very precisely. The Great Pyramid is the largest man-made expression of pi and the golden ratio visible on Earth. Khufu's son Khafre chose another concept for his pyramid. That of the sacred triangle, 3, 4, 5, in symmetry, the Pythagorean triangle. By the way, it would seem that Pythagoras never existed. Here is the plan as it was drawn at the time. The large cavity was fitted with limestone concrete to make the underground chamber. From the ground level to the underground chamber, the height is 56 cubits. From the floor to the middle chamber, the height is also 56 cubits. Then each space is cut in half and in quarters. The angle of the descending and ascending corridors is the diagonal of the 2 squares. From the underground chamber to the intersection, there are 161 cubits. From the intersection to the ascending corridor, made with the same mold, there are also 161 cubits. The architect also planned the 3 plugs used to close the entrance and a secret well shaft to go out. The middle chamber is in the middle and coated with white limestone. The king's chamber is in red Aswan granite and on 5 levels. The 4 shafts, precise to the centimeter, target the sacred stars. The position of the sun ray at noon on July 14th, the day of Sirius's rising, determined the location of the king's chamber. Re and the king were to be reunited in the chamber. The Egyptians divided the pyramid up like plots of fields, and in accordance with their principles, they integrated the sacred numbers into their monuments. From the construction of the underground chamber until the end of the construction, the Egyptians recorded the height measurements precisely and meticulously. These precise height readings, row by row, to the nearest centimeter, served them throughout construction. Once the plan was completed and the dimensions decided, they calculated the volumes. They had to determine if there was enough limestone on site to complete the Great Pyramid and the monuments around. The Egyptians knew that such a pyramid required 2.6 million cubic meters of limestone. Before starting such a monument, they had to make sure there was enough material to finish it, at the risk of ending up with a truncated pyramid. Egyptians therefore knew how to calculate volume long before the Rhind and Moscow papyrus, dating earlier than 1600 BC. You cannot make concrete without having standard measurements of volume and mass. Following careful field inspections, the volume was calculated before the work was started. Hemiunu further perfected the pyramid by converting it into a concave apothem. The drawing of the pyramid today is precisely the starting blueprint. Nothing, absolutely nothing, was changed during construction. At the time of construction, the Nile floods arrived at the foot of the hill. Water was essential for mixing and needed to be close at hand. It is for this reason that all the pyramids were built by the river. Making concrete and grinding limestone required a lot of water, about 20% of the total volume. Here is what it represents in relation to the pyramid. 500,000 cubic meters. How does one raise all this water up from below? The Egyptians invented the screw pump, or so-called Archimedes screw. Some historians believe that this method was known in Babylon, 400 years before Archimedes. It was known thousands of years earlier by the Egyptians. The Egyptians dug 3 passages about 10 meters wide. It is easy to dig in soft limestone. In order to route the water and send it to the other side, they installed wooden viaducts in these passages. The cavity was then filled with limestone concrete. The Egyptians had known the equinoxes for a long time. The date is April 13th, 2560 BC, the time 6 hours 3 minutes. The vernal equinox. The sun will rise in a few minutes precisely east. A team is in place with sticks and ropes to be able to align with the sun. They await the first rays. The sun is rising. 3 or 4 Egyptians quickly arrange the sticks and ropes. 5 minutes later, the sun moves, but the first 4 sticks are aligned to the east. This configuration of 90 and 180 degrees is projected at the bottom of the cavity. The Egyptians had experience with this precision, which they had used in the fields at the banks of the Nile for hundreds of years. The edges of the cavity are transformed into a shallow basin, where the limestone clay, natron, and lime are mixed. Once the mixture is obtained, they open the valves and let the concrete flow to the bottom of the cavity. Indeed, they filled these natural bowls to then make the underground tunnels. Limestone concrete, once dried, takes on a natural rock appearance. That's why geologists haven't noticed. No trace of fire was found in the underground chamber. This explains why the concrete was made outdoors. The Egyptians brought back natron salt, sodium carbonate from Natron Valley or from the surroundings, to make caustic soda. Lime was produced on site by heating limestone 100 meters from the site. It is July 14th, 2561 BC. Everything is ready. The Egyptians wait for the Nile floods to start. The site is divided into 4 teams. 100 workers are waiting near the screw pumps to draw the water up. The other teams are waiting by the pools to mix the materials, and just as many others are at the bottom of the cavity. Sirius rises. A few hours later, the Nile overflows and reaches the foot of the hill. The workers begin to turn the screw pumps. The water rises and flows to the other side. They mix dark brown limestone with natron and lime. A few moments later, they open the valves and the concrete pours from the edge of the bowl. The workers have already measured and set up the mold at the bottom of the bowl, which will create the South Underground Tunnel. The concrete just has to flow around it. They will use the same principle for the underground chamber. The mold has been put in place and the concrete was poured around and over it. Workers took less care for the walls of the underground chamber than for the top of the pyramid. This concrete contains much less water than that of the upper part of the pyramid. When the mold is removed quickly and it has not had time to dry, it gives this rough appearance. The Egyptians never dug underground chambers or corridors below the pyramids, since it's impossible. They simply filled it in. May the archaeologist Mark Lerner rest assured, the workers did not suffer. They worked in the open air and in good conditions, as was the case for the unfinished pyramid of Djedefre. The cavity was then filled with limestone concrete. This explains the high precision of the South Underground Tunnel, the service tunnel, but also the sharp edges of the tunnel in this photo of Edgar Wise in 1910. To validate this theory, one simply needs to take a sample of the walls of the underground and do a chemical analysis. The Egyptians used the same method to build the descending tunnel and the well shaft. They established a formwork structure like this. The diagonal of 2 squares, which gives an angle of 26.57 degrees, which will also be used for the tunnel. This same structure will be used 3 to 4 years later to make the ascending corridor and for the Grand Gallery. They continued the molds and construction of the well shaft simultaneously. The walls of the well shaft have support notches for workers' feet, so that they could come down and come out of the pyramid when it was complete 13 years later. Thus they arrive at the level of the cave known as the grotto. At this level, they left a cavity and a block of granite to plug the well shaft behind them. The workers pour the first blocks of the pyramid. The volume of the cavity is estimated at around 450,000 cubic meters. That is not much compared to the 2.6 million cubic meters remaining. The workers are now approaching the surface. A 4th passage is opened to speed up the work. The work is divided into 2 work sites. Some mix and others fill. In order to free up the space of the pyramid, the ground limestone is made into concrete and poured in the center. The land beneath the platform of the pyramid is fully graded. Filling the cavity took approximately 3 years based on calculated estimates. This technique of arranging natural cavities was used for all the pyramids. It is particularly evident in the Pyramid of Medum. Follow the lines. The cavity was fitted out with formwork molds and limestone concrete. The walls, the floor, and the ceiling were made by pouring concrete. It is easier to fill in than to dig and carve out a cave. At the beginning, they form a dozen African lines. A team digs the soft limestone and a team does the mixing. The other workers line up in African file to carry the buckets from hand to hand. Once the buckets are emptied, they return them in the same way. 260 men are needed for each bucket brigade, a real conveyor belt. The organization is precise and meticulous. They poured the slab of the pyramid 1 cubit east with recesses to pose the cornerstones. The floor is made with limestone and lots of water. The addition of water allows the soil to self-level perfectly. This explains the horizontal precision of the floor to the nearest 21 millimeters. No need for extraterrestrial technology. From the tunnel, they trace the perimeter of the pyramid with ropes and sticks. At 220 cubits, in the middle of the future south face of the pyramid, they put a picket 4 cubits inward. The workers realign themselves with respect to the new point in the center. The first segment of the apothem perimeter is done. They then line up 90 degrees with a wooden angle and do the same on the other side. Same for the other 2 sides. The perimeter of the future pyramid is now drawn, precise to the millimeter in apothem. It is a perimeter of 8 sides which is drawn on the ground with ropes. It is the future shape of the pyramid. Once the pyramid was completed, at each equinox, one sees the sides divided in half by a shadow. The equinoxes are visible to the naked eye tens of kilometers away. It is at this stage that the architect Hemiuni stops filling the center and continues with molded stones. From now on, construction is done with stones poured into the formwork molds. The molds for the cornerstones are graduated with a slope of 51.50 degrees. The most difficult work is in grinding the limestone and preparing the mixture to make concrete. The first molds are in place. About 1,200 workers mix limestone with natron and lime in the basins. They then line up to transport the buckets from hand to hand. The 4 cornerstones of the exterior facing are poured. The blocks of the first row are 3 cubits high. Then they continue towards the center, meticulously following the ropes and the pickets. The first row of stones is poured. They leave the row open in different places. These are openings to let the lines of bucket carriers pass. It is estimated that 40 bucket brigades were necessary to transport the buckets one by one, as well as all the equipment. By working 3 months a year, 8 hours a day, and with buckets of 15 kilograms, the pyramid was completed between 10 and 13 years in good humor, joy, and pleasure. Once the base row was completed, the workers continued to fill the interior with brown limestone, less attractive than that of the exterior. Inside, every other block was made with molds. The next day, they filled in the intervals. poured the second row, and then they casually filled the interior. This is how they erected the pyramid from the bottom to the top. More convincing proof that the pyramid is made of geopolymer concrete. It is true that Jean-Pierre Adam says that no stone is like the other. Davidovits, who tells us that the pyramids are built with molded artificial stones. Common sense, the common sense of a butcher, a good, honorable man. Says if we mold materials like bricks, they will all have the same shape. There will only be one mold for all stones. Well, yes, it seems logical. It is common sense. Thank you. However, there are not two stones among the millions of stones of the Great Pyramid that have the same dimensions. They are all unique. The row heights are respected in the siding and approaching the siding, but not for the rest. They are all different. So why would we give ourselves the difficulty to make millions of molds to make millions of stones? Although it was so simple to make row bricks and standardize the construction of the pyramids. To make it look like that's not how they did it. It makes it possible to say this affirmation is quackery. Common sense tells you it's so. You don't have to be an Egyptologist. You have provided arguments to justify the use of the word charlatan. This is your response. I find it convincing. But he does not say that all the stones of each and every row have an identical height. It is unimaginable that hundreds of thousands of stones from the second row, for example, were cut to the same height, to the nearest centimeter. No white massive stones were ever brought from Tura. The white limestone used for the facing stones was extracted in the surrounding area. Davidovits' analyses show that the composition of the Kufi stones does not contain Tura limestone. We compared the composition of natural limestone samples from quarries of Tura and Madi with stones from the pyramid of Khufu, and we discovered a number of anomalies. First observation. The composition of the stones of the pyramids is much more complex than those of official quarry stones. Certain micro-constituents of these stones show traces of a fast chemical reaction that didn't allow them a natural crystallization. An inexplicable reaction if the stones were cut, but perfectly understandable if we admit that they were made like concrete. So that confirms the thesis defended for 30 years by the inventor of geopolymers, the French chemist, also an Egyptologist, Joseph Davidovits. One estimates that the construction of the pyramid required around 7,000 or 8,000 workers. They had to be fed and housed daily. 100 people oversaw taking care of these workers. The Greek historian Herodotus described the builders of the pyramids as slaves. This gave birth to a popular myth perpetuated by the sweeping epic films of the Hollywood studios of the 1960s. A site where hundreds of thousands of slaves would have worked is unthinkable. It would have required as many Egyptians to oversee them. If some still think that it was slaves who built the pyramids, it is because they are not up to date. All archaeologists and Egyptologists are categoric. There were no slaves in Egypt. In January 2010, Zahi Hawass discovered a series of tombs dating from the time of the construction of the pyramids. They are those of the workers buried near their pharaoh. They would never have been buried with so much honor if they had been slaves, he says. Skeletons were found in the fetal position, the head facing west and the feet eastward, according to tradition in ancient Egypt. It is the ERA project under the direction of Dr. Mark Lerner which made it possible to discover the village workers. It was found 400 meters from the Sphinx. The dwellings could accommodate thousands of men. Archaeologists have found 100 seals bearing the names of Khafre and Menkaure. Evidence suggests that these men regularly consumed meat and worked in 3-month periods. The whole kingdom was involved in the construction of the pyramid. It was a national project. Workers came from all over the country. They now continue to fill the interior as well as the descending corridor simultaneously with the well shaft. This is the reason why we notice in the underground tunnel a part which is made in masonry stones, and part of the tunnel is made of natural limestone in perfect continuity. They start the ascending corridor. At this stage, 600,000 cubic meters of limestone concrete have been moved. Classic theory says that 3 granite plugs were stored in a large gallery to later be released and plug the entrance. The large gallery is very narrow. If the 3 granite plugs had been stored somewhere, it would have been a big problem for its construction. There is no trace of friction or scratches on the walls. In addition, the walls are not smooth, which does not facilitate sliding. Conversely, the traces of friction are found in the large gallery because of the cart. Blocks that descend as seen in animation cannot slide in real life. A photo taken in the 50s and 60s totally contradicts the fact that the 3 granite plugs were released from the large gallery. The 3 granite plugs were poured and then stored there next to the entrance. Yes, you heard right. Poured granite. Official theory says that the obelisk was carved out of the rock with dolerite balls, but that after the rock cracked, it was abandoned. I would like to keep the mystery of the granite a secret, but that would give the UFO and Atlantis theorists a hook to hang their hat on. To understand granite, you must touch it. You must try to break it to immediately feel its power. One can feel the fiery depths of the earth, the magma. Natron mixed with lime gives caustic soda. Caustic soda mixed with water and white sand heated to 1000 degrees Celsius produces sodium silicate, referred to as liquid glass or water glass. They mixed it with potassium silicate, obtained by the same process. They poured the liquid into a lens-shaped mold. 2 to 3 days later, they unmolded the transparent lens. A lens that focuses light at one point, a magnifying glass. The larger the lens, the higher the temperature. Everyone can make their own solar lens with the recipe. Have fun. With a 5-meter diameter lens, the temperature reaches 1,800 degrees to 2,000 degrees Celsius. The Egyptians have just discovered solar energy. Everything is melted, nothing can resist. Granite literally melts at once, like lava. The Egyptians poured this lava into clay molds, and here is the famous statue of the 3rd dynasty, Huni, the grandfather of Khufu, in Aswan granite. Vases harder than steel, like these in tracheandesite, dating